can feel the work and care that went into Paper Mario: The Origami King seeping out of every pore of the game. The writing, the art style, the world design, everything in the game is super polished, including the fantastic soundtrack holding the experience together. The thing about the game's music that stood out to me the most is how often it dynamically adapts to fit the situation in the game. There are so many moments where moving to a certain part of the environment or getting to a certain part in the game's plot will trigger a shift in the music, and it's crazy how many different full arrangements were written and recorded for some incredibly small, easy to miss parts of the game. I'm gonna go through just a handful of my favorite examples of this, all picked from early parts of the game to avoid spoilers for those of you who haven't had a chance to check the game out yet. Ready? Let's go! First of all, the battle music. There are tons of different battle tracks in the game, each written to specifically suit the environment it's used in, as well as the severity of the battle in front of you. But they all feature big, upbeat arrangements to get you hyped up for stomping on some baddies. A great little detail that you'll almost definitely have noticed if you've played the game is that each battle track comes paired with a stripped-down thinking version for when you're trying to figure out how to position your opponents. Take the first battle theme for the Red Streamer area. The main theme comes in hot, with saxes, trumpets, and trombones playing tight, syncopated shots over a driving rhythm section. The melody comes in with the saxes, while the brass adds background figures before the electric guitar and a high synth part snag the melody and bring us into a section with funky slap bass underpinning super tight syncopated horn shots. This track is nothing if not high energy, but when it's time to start moving Goombas, the melody and horn parts fade out, leaving behind just keyboard, guitar, bass, and drum parts, with the focus shifted mostly on the bass. The original drum part also crossfades to a separate thinking track that replaces the washy open hi-hats, booming snare backbeat, and driving tom fills with tight, simmering closed hi-hats, a cross-stick rim click on the snare, and fills that stick to syncopated hi-hat rhythms. This is a great example of how much a drum part can change the vibe of a track. The bass, keyboard, and guitar parts don't change at all during this transition to thinky mode, but the change in drum style brings the whole arrangement to a totally different musical place. The intensity of the main battle theme is still there, simmering underneath the surface, but it's also much more subdued. Perfect for racing against the clock to find the position that will let you flatten your opponents in one go. It's clear that the composers were very aware of the changing dynamic the player experiences moving through these battles. After you lock in your position and get ready for some stomping, no matter what point you're at in the battle theme, a big drum and horn fill cuts in from the next beat after you entered your lineup until the end of that current bar of music. At the end of that bar of fill, the tune comes back in at the point it would otherwise be at with the full original instrumentation, kicking the music into high gear right as you solve the puzzle. This means that every single battle is scored for a climax right as you're ready to pummel some paper peons, but there's a lot of easy to miss work that went into this fun little detail. There's 4 different fills that can be triggered, one for each case where you need either a 4-beat long, 3-beat long, 2-beat, or 1-beat long fill to carry you from when you hit that button till the end of the current measure of music. And there's a completely different set of fills like this that gets triggered if you submit a bad lineup of enemies. The effect of all this work planning, writing, and implementing the system is a soundtrack that feels totally seamless, that perfectly accompanies the flow of battle as you play in a way that's almost unnoticeable. The music of each environment also adapts to fit the player's experience, with loads of dynamic changes in the soundtrack used to emphasize a particular section of a level, or even sometimes to add a little bit of comedy. A lot of these shifts can be found in the game's hub world, Toad Town. The Toad Town music consists of the game's main theme arranged differently depending on where you are in the game's plot. Before clearing the first world boss, the theme is played by a simple trio of marimba, accordion, and recorder. each of these world bosses and getting rid of their respective streamers causes the arrangement that plays in Toad Town to evolve, adding a piano, then a wind quartet, then electric bass and drums, strings, electric guitar, synths. By the end of the game, it's a huge arrangement, and the gradual growth towards this big production mimics the way the town gradually fills up and becomes more lively as you move through the game. This is a great way to musically reflect the player's overall progress, but on top of this, the music also changes to different arrangements to reflect what specific part of Toad Town you're exploring at any given moment. By the cafe, the main theme is played by a trio of 2 acoustic guitars and a double bass, similar to the kind of acoustic band you might hear at an outdoor cafe. In the Musée Champignon, you're treated to an elegant solo piano arrangement of the theme. But my favorite example of this is when you enter the Toad Town port. Standing on the dock watching the waves with this bouncy accordion, winding viola line, and tremolo guitar and mandolin just feels so right. But you may have noticed something odd about this one. See, all of the arrangements I mentioned earlier stick tightly to the form and tempo of the main theme so that you can crossfade between them at any point in the piece without breaking up the musical flow. Toad Town Port's arrangement is the same, however, it's written with this nautical waltz feeling in 3/4 time. To make this work, each bar of the original theme was split across 2 bars of the new waltz time arrangement, and the tempo was shifted up so that these 2 bars of 3/4 fit the exact length of 1 bar in the original theme. Basically, the original theme's quarter note pulse is equal to the dotted quarter note in the new port arrangement. This means that when moving from the town to the port and back, we never lose our place in the piece, but we do get this very cool polyrhythmic transition as we shift to a totally different time feel. The funniest part of this is that playing through the game normally, you probably spend a total of like 10 seconds on the port just running to get to your boat, and yet they threw in this whole other arrangement to give those 10 seconds a super fun, super fitting, seafaring kind of sound. This game is the best! Besides just adapting for where you are in your environment, the music also often adapts to fit the emotional tone of what's happening at any given point during the game. A lot of the time, this results in really subtle but really effective details. For example, the Picnic Road music fades into silence as you get near to the Earth Elemental's temple, leaving you with just the whistling of the wind around you. After getting inside the temple and seeing what you're actually dealing with though, the area around the temple gives you a cool rustic arrangement of the Picnic Road theme that crossfades back to the normal arrangement once you get back on the main path. This is a perfect musical accompaniment to the state of the player moving through this level. The way we're presented with the Earth Temple makes it seem like this big, ominous challenge, and the lack of music mirrors our anticipation. After getting inside and poking around a little bit, the temple loses its mystique, and so the sound design in the area around it changes to reflect that. Let's check out how the attention to detail and focus on scoring the moment-to-moment experience of the game plays out in the very first area that Mario finds himself in after the game's intro sequence, the Whispering Woods. The area begins in a little clearing that features no background music. This silence is a big contrast from the bombastic cutscene that directly preceded it, and it gives the area kind of an unnerving feeling. We usually expect music in games, especially a game like this, so having a prolonged sequence of collecting confetti, finding your partner, and knocking down this tree without any musical accompaniment creates a little bit of tension. Moving into the next area, this sense of unease is intensified as we begin to hear whispers echoing out from the trees around us, and this is augmented musically by the introduction of sparse little figures played by pizzicato strings, marimba, and a kind of chimey synth. These figures don't convey any strong sense of key, but they aren't very dissonant either. Just little musical jabs to keep us on our toes, just like you would be if you were making your way through a strange new environment, hearing voices whispering all around you. After working your way through the level a little bit, you get into a clearing with a big tree stump in the middle, and find as you try to move past it that you're stuck in a loop. This area is accompanied with new, soft chord pads that take us away from the creepy whispering, but we're still not quite sure of ourselves yet. A cutscene plays where we discover that the trees in the forest are alive, scored in an appropriately cartoony fashion. It's after this cutscene where we meet old Grandsappy, the stump from before, that the proper Whispering Woods music comes in. The kind of creepy, kind of friendly forest atmosphere is captured by the jagged and sparsely accompanied bassoon and flute melodies, weaving in and out of different tonalities with plenty of chromaticism obscuring any kind of home key. The accompanying low piano clusters and marimba arpeggios likewise refuse to stick to one key, offering up the right balance of dissonance to feel curious and strange without becoming overly daunting or dramatic. For the most part, the piece keeps things sparse, rarely featuring more than 2 instruments playing simultaneously, but it does build to a climax where we have this flute melody and bassoon counterline soaring up above a piano part that gives us descending, stabbing arpeggios and chords. This part feels a little more structured and tonal than the previous section, but the music uses some harmonic ambiguity to keep you from getting too comfortable. This big B chord that kicks off the phrase will eventually feel like our tonic, but coming straight out of the previous non-tonal murmurings, we don't have a clear idea of what this chord means yet. This is then followed up with a progression that constantly shifts the harmonic color palette relative to this first B chord. The following A minor chord evokes a kind of B Phrygian sound with its C natural. The following G sharp minor chord brings us back to a B major sound with its D sharp, and the next G borrows from the B minor scale. When this lands back on a B major chord in the following bar, B starts to feel more like our tonal center, but all of the modal borrowing makes it very unstable. This tenuous balance is maintained through a walk from D sharp diminished to C sharp diminished to D to E minor that resolves back to our tonic B, and the intensity winds down from our climax with one last move through this B to A minor to G sharp minor to G progression. We end on a big held B chord, but the sense of release you'd expect from this last resolution to B gets stepped on by the piano, sprinkling a descending B augmented arpeggio on top, and then the marimba walking up the B whole tone scale right afterwards. Besides dissipating our sense of key to make for a smooth transition back to the beginning of the loop, the augmented and whole tone sounds both perfectly fit the curious, otherworldly, and mildly anxious feeling that the Whispering Woods is trying to capture. After reviving the soul seed that you need to give to Grandsappy, you hear the old tree stump cry for help, and your race back to the clearing to see what happened is accompanied with a shift in the music. The musical character of the Whispering Woods is retained through the same instrumentation, piano, marimba, and bassoon, but the energy has become much more desperate. Quiet staccato piano clusters bounce on the offbeats to give the music a sudden drive, with huge piano chords stacking up tritones dropped in between to really let you know something bad is going down. The interjecting marimba lines flitting up and down whole tone scale figures evoke startled woodland creatures skittering up and down trees around you, and the dissonant tritone and half-step intervals used in these piano chords perfectly captures the sense of urgency you'd want the scene to have. After finding Grandsappy's remains and reviving him, you're treated to a fun song feature as Grandsappy grows into an enormous and lively young tree again. This is very goofy and fun, but the best part is after the cutscene is over. A brand new piece of music comes in, a celebratory and energetic piece scored for big band with driving drums and syncopated bass lines grooving underneath tight sax section and brass work. There's a full melody that moves through different sections, featuring vibraphone and full string section, piano melody with harmonized sax counterline, and a big full band crescendo into this super fun descending riff back to our tonic A major. This is a full 27 bar long loop scored for at least 15-piece band, probably more, and it plays literally from when this cutscene ends till you walk out of that room. That's it. I'm not kidding. You can hang around in the woods if you want to hear the full piece. You can go back after you leave and hear it again, but if you're just a normal player trying to get through the game, you will hear probably 3 bars of this awesome, groovy tune. It accompanies the moment perfectly and adds so much charm and character to complement the world design and writing, and it doesn't appear anywhere else in the game or anything either. This is what I mean when I say this game doesn't cut corners. Origami King is committed to having its music hit exactly the right mood at exactly the right time, and it doesn't matter if it's a tiny part of the game or if it's in an area that most people aren't going to notice. These little details show just how much love and dedication they poured into the game, and they are everywhere. Seriously, I barely scratched the surface with this video. Going through and seeing all the different musical interactions was my favorite part of playing the game. If you haven't checked it out yet and you're a fan of creative music implementation in games, you should definitely go give it a shot. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you really enjoyed that! If you liked the video and want to support what I do, you can check out my Patreon page over here, or consider buying an 8-Bit Music Theory notebook made in collaboration with the Musician's Notebook. They're pretty cool. You can also follow me on Twitter. I almost never tweet, but when I do, it's announcing some of the various live stream events that I've been doing with other video game music YouTubers every so often lately. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and stay creasy.